So
that's better. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I'm coming from the French Defender of Rights, and we had the chance to start learning on those subjects of algorithms through some claims and decision, and also evaluation reports or opinion on legislation. So I will not really describe them all in detail because maybe it will be for the discussion afterwards, but maybe just to have an idea, we first worked, as many of you did, on traditional scoring practices of bank and insurance companies. This was not machine learning, but it's more simple algorithm, but it's still a way also to work on discrimination on the ground of age, health, or sex. We published a report 4 years ago now already, on the social benefit fraud, targeting the use of predictive algorithms to identify people who are likely to fraud. And there was like stereotyping coming back again on people born outside the EU or people with poor incomes. And so this was also one of our first statements on the risk of algorithm. And then we also published a guide on recruitment. It was not typically on artificial intelligence, but it was on automatic tools used, and we warned on the risk of these automatic tools for the recruitment process. Then we had an opinion on a bill reforming the justice system, where we outlined our concern about the use of algorithm in the justice system. It was not very detailed, but it was just a warning here also. Then in the context of planned reform on bioethics, we published an opinion also on the use of algorithm by health professionals. It's like some question such as the ability of doctors to parameter such technical device, the lack of consent formulated by patients to be analyzed by artificial intelligence. Another one, maybe we'll also have a discussion on it later on. It was on the education sector. It was a decision called Parcoursup, which is the name of this algorithm platform introduced by the government to collect and process requests of high school graduates as part of the national procedure for pre-registration into the first cycle of higher education. And we stated that there was a risk of discrimination because there was the use of the place of residence of the French students, which is in France a legal ground of discrimination. And we also addressed the risk of not taking into account the disability of some students. And so there was then a high administrative court decision and constitutional court decision, and some change in the practice for those algorithms, but still there are some black boxes that are not completely transparent enough. And then maybe I just focus maybe on the cooperation we have with different stakeholders at the national and European level to deal with those subjects. And first we started because we had one colleague, Sarah Beneshu, who really get to be expert on that subject, and she really started to have dialogue mainly at the beginning with the academics and try to see what was the publication on that subject and how could we as Defender of Rights start working on that with them. And of course we also have a very strong cooperation with the Data Protection Commission, and we'll also maybe have more discussion about what we did, how we worked with them, but mainly we co-organized with them a seminar last year, which was interdisciplinary seminar with a lot of academics coming from different backgrounds. And this is something that I think is very important, as Raja already stated, that we have to have such a pluridisciplinary approach. So we had the inputs of course of legal experts, but also from economics, sociologists, statisticians, computer science engineers, and we all have to discuss and think together, because if we all stay in our expertise, we cannot have this global approach of this subject. And we also work a lot with the NGOs. We have different committees on different grounds of discrimination. So the equality between women and men, the equality based on age, on the health, all those committees that we regularly meet twice a year, and at those occasions we presented our work on that subject. It was also a way of raising awareness. And so when we organized the seminar with the Data Protection Commission, we then published some recommendations that was really on transparency, auditing, and training, on what was already a little bit discussed before. And this was also a way for us to position ourselves in the public debates. And this is something important to do as an equality body, to be really visible on that subject, to say, okay, we have maybe not all the full capacity right now to deal with individual complaints, but we should be able to. And we are there also to discuss with all the different stakeholders to really be as an important actor in that field. And I think this recommendation allowed us to have such a visibility, and then we've been contacted by companies and other researchers and other administration to work with them. So it's important to have like some publication really mainly on that subject to start at least working on algorithmic discrimination.
Hi, my name is Samo Novak. I come from the Advocate of the Principle of Equality, which is the national equality body in Slovenia, established in 2016. In my presentation, I'm particularly going to focus on one action that we did, because we also don't have such a broad variety of actions that we've been doing, as for example the French equality body, as Valérie presented just a little bit ago. So I'll talk predominantly about our intervention in the process of adopting the national program on the use and the development of artificial intelligence, which was basically our first larger project in which we engaged with the topic of AI at a very systemic level. So basically in my presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of context and background to our intervention in this process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the program, and then about the form and content of our intervention. And then if there will be further questions, perhaps also regarding our other actions, we can do that in the Q&A section. So regarding the context and background, artificial intelligence, particularly at an expert and research and development level, is quite an important topic in Slovenia. AI research has a 50-year-old tradition in Slovenia, starting in 1972. And today we're having, mind that we're a very, very small country, around 30 research organizations dealing specifically with AI systems and technologies. Very recently also the UNESCO established an international research center on artificial intelligence, which I believe is also preparing global guidelines for an ethical dimension of artificial intelligence. And this center is headquartered at at a research institute in Ljubljana. Also, as you already mentioned, the government, the Slovenian government, intends to treat artificial intelligence as one of the topical priorities during Slovenia's presidency to the Council of the EU in the second half of this year. However, unfortunately, I can't really give you much information on that, because the program is still in development, and at the Advocate, we haven't been acquainted with the program yet. So our institution started engaging with the topic of artificial intelligence relatively late, or I guess definitely later than the French Defender of Rights. This was sometime at the end of last year, and our engagement was firstly primarily focused on internal capacity building in terms of acquiring basic knowledge on the topic, because probably as a lot of equality bodies, particularly due to the fact that equality bodies often employ specialists from humanities, social sciences, legal studies, and so forth, we basically had to start from ground zero in terms of our knowledge. So basically that meant a lot of reading, desktop research to get a basic grasp on key issues. Very important sources for this were the Equinet report, FRA's report on getting the future right, and then all of the commission's papers, resolutions of the European Parliament, scientific articles, and so forth. So the next challenge was to find a way how to start publicly engaging with the topic of artificial intelligence, particularly with policymakers. In other words, we were trying to find a way how to put ourselves and the discrimination-related issues on the national AI map, particularly for policymakers. And we identified a good opportunity to do so with an intervention in the public consultation phase on the national program on artificial intelligence, and we did so at the beginning of March this year. So regarding the structure of the national program, a large number of European countries have already adopted their strategic documents on artificial intelligence. Sometimes they call them strategies, other times action plans, programs, doesn't really matter. In general, these strategic documents outline the country's position on AI and AI-related issues, and sometimes they also propose planned measures on how to tackle those specific AI issues. The core of the Slovenian national program is structured along 10 strategic goals. I'm not going to name them now, but they're basically the core chapters of the program, and each of these chapters include a brief description of key issues, Slovenia's position on those issues and key goals regarding those issues, and then measures on how to implement these strategic guidelines and also a framework for their financing. So it's actually a quite detailed action plan. So our institution was did not participate in the working group that composed the initial draft, but after the draft was publicly unveiled, we carefully studied it and provided the Ministry of Public Administration, who's responsible for the national program, with recommendations that had two main goals: emphasizing equality and non-discrimination as key, or at least one of key human rights concerns in the program, and making sure that public policy measures envisaged in the program also address these concerns, both from a threats and opportunities perspective. I don't have time to go into details of our intervention, but I'm just briefly going to mention four main areas in which we intervened, in the form of a recommendation to the Ministry of Public Administration. In the context of a strategic guideline on AI and education, we recommended that specific measures should be envisaged on how to use AI technologies to improve the accessibility and effectiveness of educational processes for vulnerable groups and children with special needs. This was a topic that was otherwise briefly mentioned in the national program, but wasn't really reflected in the measures. So what we agreed with the Ministry of Education was, and found as a solution, was that we added to the national action plan that also sectoral strategies concerning education need to be in line with the national plan on AI. In addition, on the basis of our recommendation, also an explanation was added that the term people with special needs in this context of using and developing AI has to include all persons with disabilities within the scope of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Secondly, in the context of a strategic guideline on strengthening security with the use of AI, we recommended that identification of hateful, intolerant, and discriminatory content, so basically content moderation tools, should be listed as an additional way of using AI in the security context, while also taking into account other fundamental rights. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, in the context of the strategic goal on ethical and regulatory framework of AI, we recommended that issues concerning protection against discrimination or discriminatory AI should be specifically emphasized in the text. And ultimately, an additional text was included in the program emphasizing that ethical principles must be mirrored in appropriate legal regulation of AI. And in addition, the new text states that while there is no legal vacuum in the field of human rights in an AI context, further regulation is necessary in order to ensure effective enforcement of these existing rules. For instance, non-discrimination law at international, EU, and national levels. And it is now also stated that such regulation has to allow for the effective use, of effective legal remedies when AI technologies have discriminatory effects, and that in this context, ensuring transparency of AI systems and clear identification of responsible and liable subjects is of key importance. So this is now written down as a position of Slovenia in the context of AI. And finally, in the context of the strategic guideline on introduction of AI solutions to the economy and society, recommended that envisaged measures for the education of private and public sector actors on the ethical framework of AI should also explicitly include topics on human rights compliance, particularly regarding the prohibition.
Samo, I'm going to have to ask you to wind up in a minute. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, these were our substantive interventions with our recommendation, and I have to say that the Ministry of Public Administration was very open to our suggestions. It also allowed us to change the text ourselves, and basically the whole text, which we wanted to see in the national program, is now also included in it. I have to emphasize, however, that the final version of the national program is shortly still to be adopted by the government, but we are quite sure, and so is the Ministry of Public Administration, that the text that we included won't be changing in the future. Just as a final sentence and a conclusion, perhaps a suggestion to colleagues from other equality bodies that haven't engaged with the topic yet, I personally find intervening in the context of national programs on AI a great way to start working on the topic, putting yourselves on the map without having to start from ground zero in the sense of autonomously producing your own materials, but rather building or improving already existent materials that are produced by other public policy actors. So I'm going to wrap up here.
Thank you so much.
I think we have started to think about the issue at least around the time that Klaus Schwab said what you quoted before, maybe even earlier. But for a long time, it was a big challenge for us to properly understand the issue, I think, and get a grasp of how it directly relates to our work and to our mandate. Then in late 2017, the then Minister of Justice proposed a digital equal treatment act for Germany, an idea that was quite quickly shut down, but that really finally showed us and made it clear to us that we have to tackle the issue directly and have to find an approach for us. And so initially we wanted to take stock and to really produce something that explains the issue to us as well as to policymakers and the general public. So we commissioned in 2018 the study that you mentioned that was aiming to take a really comprehensive look at the existing literature, but also casework from other member states as far as it existed, and really try to break the challenges down and also come up with recommendations. The study is called Risks of Discrimination Through Use of Algorithms. Was carried out by researcher Carsten Orwart of the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. There is an English translation. Maybe if it hadn't been put in the comments, I will do that later. The study included a number of recommendations. It's a pretty thorough analysis, a number of recommendations, many of which are in line with what the Commission white paper and now the regulatory proposal later said. About transparency, the need for transparency, about the need to differentiate between certain risk classes of AI or ADM. It also already recommended duties for documentation and also for the possibility for equality bodies to access such documentation to properly do their work. It also points out the lack of collective legal protection or associated rights to action in the German Equal Treatment Act as a problem that is much more urgent because of AI ADM. It also included recommendations to us, to FADA, and one of them was that we must take part in the public debate around risk of discrimination posing themselves through AI, and that our expertise in anti-discrimination law should be part of our regulatory activity. So to facilitate that, when we released the report in September 2019, we organized an expert roundtable to discuss the findings, and that brought together many of the experts in the field, well, from government, but also from researchers, scientists who mainly had a tech background, a data protection background, a consumer protection background, an ethics background, all the fields that have been working on the issue before us already, but did not necessarily come from an equality law background. And I think that event already served, and the release of the report served the purpose that Samo described as putting us on the map in terms of the national discussion. The other part in which we took up this challenge to be part of the conversation and part of the public debate was that we wanted to work with the part of civil society that we usually engage with, namely the organizations that work in advice centers, work with the disadvantaged groups that we work with in our everyday work. So in late 2019, December 2019, we had a large-scale conference, the Anti-Discrimination Days that we organized for the first time, couldn't repeat because of COVID so far. That was a 2-day conference on a range of issues, but one of the most prominent panels that we organized was on AI discrimination. And I think this event that was very well attended really served the purpose to see the issue also with civil society organizations. And we have observed since then that there have been an increased number of small-scale events, of discussions within civil society, parts of civil society that have not dealt with tech issues before, now tackling the issue. Also in 2020, right before the pandemic, we had the first capacity building seminar internally for other staff members. We hope to be able to build on that in the future and hope to follow up. At the same time, we began to work with the Ministry of Family Affairs, with which we are affiliated organizationally, to help shape the national data strategy that the German government was working on at the time. This strategy was passed in January 2021, and it gives FADA a mandate. It gives FADA the following mandate: to look into how discrimination of individuals through the use of aggregated, anonymized, synthesized data can be prevented, and in how far effective protective mechanisms and relevant laws can be developed. And this is the first time that a official government document explicitly acknowledges our role and assigns us a proper role with regards to regulation of big data and algorithmic decision-making. We are currently exploring a couple of elements in which we can fulfill this role, especially from a legal viewpoint. As for regulation, the federal government has always maintained that it wanted to wait for the Commission proposal. So the coming month will definitely be interesting, and we hope to get involved in whatever happens in the German scene there. In the meantime, we have one more project that has just started in February 2021, a project that we are funding, and that will be carried out by Algorithm Watch. Jessica from Algorithm Watch is, I believe, with us somewhere in the list of participants. I've seen her name. The project is called AutoCheck, and it's a new research and training project that basically has 3 aims. The first is to help those in civil society, but also within FADA and other public advice centers that provide legal advice to victims of discrimination to better understand algorithmic discrimination. But then crucially, in the second point, to then enable them to ask complainants the right questions when they turn to them to detect possible cases of algorithmic discrimination. To then, and that would be the third aim, to increase the number of German case studies in order to better inform the public debate, as well as our own understanding of the issue. Because we come from the assumption that there are many more cases out there than have been recognized, especially on a national level. We very often in Germany discuss the issues using examples from abroad, from the United States, from other European countries, but we think it's crucial to get a better picture of what's happening on the ground in Germany at the moment. The initial focus of this research is on access to goods and services, because that's what we could fund at the moment, but we hope to expand that to work life in other protected areas possibly. Project has just started and will run for, I think, over 18 months. So we hope to be able to report on its progress in the second round of the training in December, and I think and hope that Jessica might also be involved in that. And I think that's what I can say for the time being.